I'm Austin Norman, Eric Strickland to my left, your right on stream. The face you see on stream, Bryan Munson of Husker Online with us, breaking down a huge weekend in Husker football recruiting. Before we do that, Bryan, 34-28 Bills over the Cardinals. Your reaction to the Week 1 win for Buffalo?
Oh, I know. I'm still probably.
Oh no!
Going to the end of the first quarter, it was rough. I mean, it didn't look like they were making the play. Then you had Josh Allen's fumble on the first drive, and they just couldn't stop them. Finally things seemed to kind of turn in the second half. They got to punt the ball a couple of times, and I mean, obviously getting the didn't Buffalo allow the first new kicking rule touchdown return of all? I mean, so there were a lot of just things that they needed to clean up, and but the defense finally came to play in the second half, and that was great. So all in all, it was a victory. Josh Allen, he's a warrior. I don't know how people consider him to be the player in the NFL, and hopefully the injury is not too big of a.
The flip side of that was Nebraska football came to play in the first half. Second half was a bit of a grind. How do you assess Nebraska's performance against Colorado in the 28-10 win?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of said it right there. Came out and executed in the first half, and then second half it seemed like, I mean, I hate to say it, but I kind of felt like the referees wanted to become part of the storyline. It seemed like there were a number of calls that were made against Nebraska that I didn't necessarily agree with. There were a lot of calls that I felt like were missed, particularly I think that the touchdown came on the play where Polar Bear was being held, like even like where his jersey was kind of pulled out around his shoulder pad. So I don't know how you don't make that call, honestly. But I think all in all, I think that there's a lot of things that Nebraska can clean up. I mean, they clearly left points on the field. I mean, Coach Rule even said that, but you felt that on Saturday night, kind of looking away from it. It really wasn't even a contest. It really wasn't. So if Nebraska got a few more of those things kind of cleared up, maybe got a few more of the drives, basically scored on those drives, probably scoring to the 40s, which is what I was kind of predicting. Although I think the defense was the star. I think, like you said on Saturday night, I mean, I think the defense just played lights out for the most part. They got pressure on them without still unveiling too many different things that they can do, I think, defensively. So there's a lot of guys that got involved, in getting pressure on the quarterback all the way, of course, to like Willis McGahee, with the last sack on the night. So all in all, I think there's a lot of things to be really excited about when it comes to defense.
While we're on defense, Nebraska had two really big recruits in the next class, Dawson Merritt, Christian Jones, both linebackers. What'd you hear from or about those guys and their time at the game on Saturday?
Yeah, Dawson got back to me this morning, and he's getting bombarded is what I think was exact words that he used with me this morning. And I mean, obviously, I understand it. I mean, Alabama had to be even interested, of course, as well, because I mean, they didn't exactly go out there and set the world on fire on Saturday either. And Nebraska did. And I mean, there were posts everywhere on Twitter about, the game environment, the atmosphere. Is it any better anywhere in the nation other than in Nebraska? So Nebraska's kind of cool again in a lot of different ways, right? And I think Dawson Merritt can see it. I think he can see, I think everybody has had to basically use these renderings, these drawings, basically of how the construction is happening or going to happen under Matt Rule. Well, I think Saturday night was kind of that first, evidence that things are going that way, that, you're back into kind of that I want to call it typical rebuild that Matt Rule has to make, and how teams fare from year one to year two, but it's looking that way. It's looking like, and I think part of the reason why I don't want to kind of say that yet is because I don't think necessarily Colorado was as good as people thought that they might have been. But I think that also the schedule, the way that it shapes up, you don't really have that kind of opponent yet until week 8. When you play against Ohio State. So you have to go out now. And I think the important part is I think we talked about, late last week. You have to go out there and stay sharp. all these games now kind of become trap games. They don't have the name Colorado or Ohio State or Oregon kind of associated to it. You just have to go out and play the next game for the next game. And if you can go out and knock them all down as they set them back up again, you could find yourself in a really good position. Like, I'm not sure if all y'all saw, but the On3, took a stab at the forecast for the college football playoff, had Nebraska's in the first 4 out.
Ooh.
So now they're already thinking that, Nebraska's in that top kind of 16 list. So really Nebraska has to go out there and just take care of business. And if they can do that, it'll be very exciting, I think, to hear about some of the conversations we're going to have down the road.
Any other defensive prospects that Nebraska made an impact on, probably positive, maybe negative, from Saturday's game against Colorado?
I just put up a great article with J.J. Dunnigan, who is a cornerback from Manhattan, Kansas.
Tell people where they can find that.
On Husker Online. It literally just went up. So if you can find me on Twitter too, go out there. It's just at Bryan Munson _. I just put up a link to that. I think that, kind of looking at the 2026 class in particular, I talked to Jaden McGregory yesterday. He had a fantastic visit. He's a guy that's been in Nebraska recently a couple times in the last couple of months. I'm going to have another visit or another update coming here shortly with Caden Cobbs, who's a safety from Denton Geyer. He had a wonderful time. I've had updates up from Hunter Higgins, who is from Wichita, Kansas, Mays South High School. He had a great time in Nebraska. I think what Hunter Higgins, like when he sees it, he watched Ty Robinson. He says a lot of similarities there for me. I mean, I have to put on some good weight, but I love what Coach Knighton's doing, moving guys up and down the line. I think I have that kind of versatility going for me. Caden Cobbs, they see him kind of moving down, playing, kind of a rover, kind of an outside linebacker, kind of being a little bit more versatile with stuff. And Jaden McGregory, I mean, he is just a fantastic athlete, and I think Nebraska's in a really good spot for him. I also have updates to come with Isaac Jensen and Jace Reynolds. Jace Reynolds, obviously the linebacker or edge linebacker from Elkhorn North. So I've got stuff still to come. It was just, man, I just couldn't get all of it done yesterday when all this stuff was kind of coming in. And honestly, it's good to kind of keep feeding this thing and keeping the thoughts and the juices going, because it's really stirring some things in me, because I just can't think of a time recently where Nebraska's had like this kind of momentum to where they can kind of go out there and sell this to recruits as opposed to close your eyes and imagine, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems like Nebraska finally has some high ground here. They have some national appeal with some of the other news outlets and people that are picking up the story and people that are very excited about what Matt Rule is doing. I'm very interested to see how the Nebraska coaching staff can kind of take this success and this momentum for a little bit of a drive.
Well, Bryan, one way that could happen would be, assistants moving on, right? A guy like Tony White that had some head coaching opportunity interviews last season. Let's say that he moves on after this season, whether it's, John Butler, Rob Dvorak, outside hire. Are the guys that Nebraska is recruiting on defense right now specifically 3-3-5 Tony White defense style fits? Or are they good enough athletes in the most case that you could see them playing different roles and maybe a different defensive scheme?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting take. I think that, how Tony White kind of has that 3-3-5, that's kind of the defensive style he likes with the attackers and just kind of turning the defensive linemen loose, and letting them get after him. And that's what he said. He's got some great ones up front that he can kind of go ahead and ride and let them do that this year. I think he has plenty of those guys still either, in the 2025 class or like, Pedshock and Tyson Terry. I think those guys are and Malcolm Simpson. I think those are guys that, you can line up at different spots all the way along that line. I think they're very versatile. I think that's what kind of is the key in that odd front defensive line. You need players that you can, although they're a little bit more limited, you can put them up, into the A gap. You can put them over the zero. You can do different things with them, and then you can move the other guys around from a 2 to a 4 to a 6, out to a 5 or a 7. I think that those are very different looking guys, but I think that these are all very versatile guys, long, athletic. I think it just depends on what kind of offense you're kind of seeing and how the game plan needs to go to kind of play on it. So I do feel like they are 3-3-5 guys. I do feel like they could play traditional roles. But I think that, listening to like the words of like Hunter Higgins and you listen to like the words that Coach Knighton, is using, to recruit the players in the 2026 class, he's preaching basically that versatility. He's telling them, like, don't give me a reason to go out there and feel like you can't do this role. You need to be ready to kind of play this, and be able to do these different things as a defensive lineman. So, I think they can be more traditional, even front guys, but I think that they are being recruited 3-3-5, and I think that all those guys love that opportunity to kind of move around.
We're talking with Bryan Munson of Husker Online here, breaking down the big recruiting weekend for Nebraska against Colorado. Let's flip it to offense here, Bryan. We've gone this long without mentioning the names Michael Terry or Cortez Mills. Any movement for Nebraska on those fronts? Yeah,
Michael Terry. Well, nothing on Cortez Mills, and I'll be honest with you. I'll go back and touch on Terry in a little bit. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I don't think Nebraska could have picked a better weekend, basically, to host Cortez Mills. OU struggled, and Nebraska's atmosphere, the environment, it was electric. Obviously, and the basically everything that surrounds the program right now, the positivity. And Dylan Raiola and where he can kind of lead things and being a true freshman quarterback. And I think the connection that both he and Terry have with Raiola, I think it's critical. I think if you didn't have that, if this was kind of another thing here where, Nebraska's trying to jump in, midstream, I think it'd be very tough to do. But, you've already hosted, Mills last year. You already had him come in for an official visit in April. Now you're kind of trying to figure in another angle to kind of get back into this equation. So I think that's a pretty big thing for him. But I think with Terry, I think Nebraska, did do a great job to impress him. One of the things, of course, he mentioned again was the environment. I tell you what, one thing that was very that kind of caught me out of all the pictures that we ran over the weekend. We had a heck of a visitor gallery on Sunday morning. So go out there and check it out on Husker Online. But Michael Terry's a big, thick kid, and that's the 5-star, number one athlete in the country, according to On3. I can kind of see why, some folks kind of see him maybe playing defense, or even like Oregon saying like you are a little bit more like of a tight end. He is a put together individual. Nebraska obviously still liking him, still look at him as a wide receiver option in their class. But I think that, Nebraska put their best foot forward the only way that they could, basically on Saturday night, trying to find a way to get in there and be a little bit more competitive. The problem obviously is, of course, Texas looked pretty good against Michigan earlier in the day. And there really is only one other team, I think, in the nation recruiting as well as Texas right now, and that's Miami. So both those programs are recruiting very, very well. So there's a lot of momentum going on there. Nebraska has to kind of get going here in a couple, 3 weeks, get out to that 4-0, 5-0 start, really starting to tee up that matchup coming up with Ohio State and get some real kind of juice going on this thing. And then maybe there's going to be more opportunity with a guy like Terry, but I think there's even opportunity for Nebraska to potentially reach back out to some guys that maybe decided not to visit Nebraska in April or June and see what they can do about maybe getting a couple of those guys to take another look at the Huskers.
And Bryan, would that be more likely to happen potentially this week against Northern Iowa, or would it be in, a few weeks now with Rutgers, right? Because you have the Friday night game against Illinois, which I'm sure we'll talk about just how much that throws off recruiting here in a little bit. But would it be smart for Nebraska to try to follow up the energy of Colorado by having another big weekend against Northern Iowa and try to capitalize on momentum? Or do you wait for maybe the Rutgers game, your next opportunity for a home Saturday?
I think you're probably looking more at Rutgers. I think that when you have these types of weekends here, like Colorado, there was a lot of time that was needed to kind of pull this thing together for Colorado. Like I said with you guys on Friday, I think I was talking to guys on their official visits in June, and they were already talking about coming back to Nebraska on the 7th of September to kind of to take in the Colorado game. So Nebraska staff has been working on this for months. To kind of pull things together for you and I probably seems a little difficult. I would try to get Rutgers teed up as quickly as possible. We do know of a couple guys, obviously, already that, we are expecting to have in town for Rutgers. You have Bonwell White, the big wide receiver from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and you got Keenan Harris, probably the number one safety on Nebraska's board from St. Louis University High School. So that weekend is going to shape up to be a very good weekend. But you also, to your point, you got Matt Ludwig coming in this weekend from Billings, Montana. That's the cousin of Vince Genatone. So this is a good chance that after kind of Texas Tech is kind of trying to find a way to get in there a little bit with him. I think Boise State's trying to also stay in the picture there a little bit with him. So this is a critical weekend to kind of make sure that Ludwig, probably comes back to Nebraska as an official visitor next year.
You heard Bryan tell you before. We'll repeat it here. HuskerOnline.com, part of the On3 Network, and Bryan Munson _ on Twitter for everything you need to know when it comes to recruiting. Bryan, thanks for chatting with us on back-to-back shows here. Appreciate the update, all your hard work. We will keep an eye out for not necessarily what you're saying, but definitely what you're typing over there at Husker Online. Thanks a ton, man.
All right, guys. See ya.